What's up, everyone? Welcome in to HQ Spotlight. Happy Friday. I'm Jacqueline D'Agostino alongside Tiffany Blackman. Thanks for spending your Friday with us. Football is over, but it's kind of not. You know, the Super Bowl is in the books. However, all the teams that did not win, so if you're not the Seattle Seahawks, you're kind of wondering, the wheels are turning. What does our team need to do to get there and eventually lift a Lombardi, Tiff?
Yeah, the wheels are constantly turning. They made the NFL season a year-round thing, but one thing we did learn from the Super Bowl is that defense wins championships. So the Patriots, they did play good defense, but not good enough to stop the Seattle Seahawks. And surely New England was hoping to hoist up that trophy, but instead they were having to be onlookers, some of the players watching the Seahawks as they celebrated their Super Bowl championship. So for now, the Patriots look forward to free agency and the draft. New England with the 31st overall pick in the first round. And a look at the rest of the AFC East. The Bills with the 26th pick, Dolphins the 11th, and the Jets with the 2nd and 16th picks of the first round. Let's dive deeper into the needs of these AFC East teams. To do that, well, we welcome in Ryan Wilson. You've got us covered for the draft, and John Breech, you've got us covered for free agency. So Ryan, we'll start with you and the Patriots draft needs. What are the priorities?
Hey, Tiffany. Hey, John. Good to see you guys. Look, I'm not going to say offensive line. Will Campbell will be fine. That poor man got crushed after getting abused. Let's move on. Let him get healthy. He'll be fine at left tackle, their former first-round pick from a year ago. I'm going to go on the other side, Tiffany, and I'm going to go with edge rusher to start because K'Lavon Chaisson, who they signed to a one-year deal, the former first-round pick of the Jags, he flashed. He had one of his best NFL seasons, but his contract's going to be up. I'm going with Akeem Mesidor, the other edge rusher out of the U. He's a little older than Reuben Bain Jr., but he is just as electric as a pass rusher coming off the edge. He's going to be about 6'3". He's going to weigh about 270 pounds. He feels like a Mike Vrabel-type player, and I think he's going to fit in right away because he's played a ton of ball in college, and that transition should be pretty seamless. And then I'm not going to go offensive line, I promise. I'm going to go wide receiver because the other issue that we had last August was, okay, who is Drake May going to throw to? Turns out he didn't need to have anyone. It wasn't a concern. This time around, I'm going with Omar Cooper Jr. Out of Indiana. He is one of the most athletic, playmaking wide receivers in this draft class that we're not talking a lot about. He has a chance to be a second-round pick, and I think he would come in right away and be one of Drake May's favorite targets.
Okay, fine, Ryan. I'll do it. I'll say offensive line because they have to do something. I'm not sure if you watched the playoffs, Ryan, but Drake May got sacked 5 times in the wild card round, 5 times in the divisional round, 5 times in the AFC Championship game, and 6 times in the Super Bowl, which would have been a Super Bowl record 7 times if not for a stat correction. The NFL saved that offensive line from going into the record book. And so I do think that you're right. Will Campbell's a rookie. He's got a lot to learn. He's going to get better. And that's why Mike Vrabel is so insistent that, hey, look, we're not going to move this guy to guard. He's going to stay at tackle. But if you are the Patriots, you do want to add some depth on the offensive line and start thinking about the future. Morgan Moses, your right tackle, is going to be 35. They've got a couple starters who are both going to be free agents after the 2026 season. So even if you're not quite ready to bring in a starter, you got to add some depth and at least try to make that line better. You did mention wide receiver. I absolutely think that's a big need that they could fulfill in free agency. You look at their number one guy, Stephon Diggs, is going through legal trouble. He's on the downside of 30. He's 32 years old when receivers tend to slow down. And then they don't really have any other home run threats on that team. Kayshon Boutte, Matt Collins, all good role players, but I'm not sure someone that Drake May can count on. So maybe they check in on Alec Pierce if the Colts don't tag him. Romeo Doubs will be out there. So there will be some receivers for the Patriots to look at. But offensive line and receiver seem like 2 positions the Patriots should target.
All right, Breech, we'll stick with you then since you didn't go easy on the Pats and the offensive line. I doubt you're going to go easy on the Bills. They didn't have to face Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson and still couldn't get out of the divisional round. And there was the criticism of Keon Coleman from their owner. Are you putting a receiver at the top of their draft needs?
Yeah, well, nothing screams we need a receiver more than the owner saying, hey, one of our top draft picks, who's a receiver, did not pay off. And obviously, Keon Coleman just out there taking strays in that press conference, which was still bizarre. But what Terry Pagula did is that he absolved Brandon Beane of making this pick, of saying, yeah, this wasn't on you, it's not your fault. Well, guess what? If you get receiver, if you get that position wrong this offseason, that is 100% your fault, because all eyes are on the Bills and their receiver position. They absolutely have to fix that. They've got the quarterback. They've got the running back and James Cook, who could help carry that offense. So all they need now is to kind of build up that receiver room. And I mentioned some of the receivers that are going to be available. Alec Pierce, you have a speedster. Maybe you go get a veteran receiver like Mike Evans if he leaves Tampa Bay, or get a versatile guy like Deebo Samuel. But there are going to be a lot of options out there. And the only other one I would throw in there for the Bills is that they've got to get some pass rush help. That was something they didn't do well last season, and so their defense struggled a lot, and the root of that was that they weren't able to rush the passer. So I think that is the other thing they need to focus on free agency, but receiver definitely needs to be #1 on their priority list.
Breech, I'm picking up what you're putting down, and I'll just say this about Brandon Beane was in a lose-lose situation, because his boss, the owner, was sitting there just saying random stuff. You could see on Brandon's face, he was like, please quit talking about what you're talking about right now. He tried to clean it up. The cat is out of the bag. At the end of the day, if they get wide receiver wrong, as Breech has noted, Tiffany, Brandon Beane will not be getting a promotion. He will likely be getting a demotion. Knowing that, if you can get a wide receiver in free agency, by the way, I have them going with Chris Brazzell out of Tennessee. Long, fast wide receiver who wins consistently downfield. That's the knock on Keon Coleman, is that he struggles to get open. That is not a knock on Chris Brazzell. He will run by anybody you put in front of him. He'll be a nice complement to Khalil Shakir, who does a lot of his damage on those short and intermediate routes and the tight ends they have. And the other thing I would keep in mind, Breech mentioned defense and edge rush. I would go just behind those edge rushers and defensive linemen and go with linebacker. Matt Milano's contract's up. Shaq Thompson's contract's up. If C.J. Allen is there at the bottom of the first round, I would jump at that if some of those wide receivers are off the board. But as Breech has noted, there will be riots in Buffalo if you do not draft one wide receiver, maybe 2 or 3. So just something to keep in mind. But either of those players that I mentioned would immediately upgrade both sides of the ball for Buffalo.
I flip-flopped you guys on draft needs and free agency, but you handled that test well. So, Ryan, we're going to go back to you. The Dolphins have a new regime. It's now the era of GM John Eric Sullivan and head coach Jeff Hafley. What do they need to do in the draft to hit the ground running?
Tiffany, this is one of those situations where you're like, awesome, I'm a GM in the NFL, and then you look at the roster, like, oh my gosh, I'm a GM for the Dolphins in the NFL. I got a lot of work to do. So, look, they're not going to be able to draft a quarterback at 11 if that's what they want to do, because we know that Fernando Mendoza is going to go 1, and then we'll have to have conversations about QB2, Ty Simpson, or whoever that happens to be. So instead, I'm going to go cornerback. They currently, if you look at their roster, have 9 cornerbacks set to hit free agency. So a lot of those guys are role players, and some of them have been injured. I would have Mansour Delane out of LSU. He was one of the few bright spots on an LSU team that certainly underachieved in 2025. He's a physical outside corner with ball skills. There'll be questions about his athleticism, but you watched him play in the SEC, and he was as athletic as any wide receiver he faced week in and week out. And then if you don't want to go in that direction, but you want to bolster the offensive line, which is something they've done frequently in Miami, keep doing it. There's Big Ione there from Penn State. He's an interior offensive line, played guard at Penn State. He has a chance to be a top 15 pick. So this field's about the range that he may come off. And whoever the quarterback ends up being, you have to protect him. We know that Tua struggles with taking sacks and certainly those concussions. So whether Tua's under center or someone else, I will with Big Ione, the guard out of Penn State, Breech.
Yeah, Ryan and I could probably spend 3 hours talking about what the Dolphins need to do this offseason to fix things, whether that's the draft or free agency. He mentioned the quarterback. To me, that's the #1 thing you have to get figured out before the draft. So you have to do that in free agency, whether that is making a trade, whether that's hoping that Kirk Cousins gets released, going after him, going after one of these guys will be out there, Malik Willis, Joe Flacco. I don't know. If you're the Dolphins, you're desperate. You got to find someone. And then not only do they need a quarterback on offense, they need everyone else. Ryan mentioned the offensive line. You look at receiver, Tyreek Hill probably not coming back. You look at tight end, Darren Waller set to hit free agency. This team has so many holes. Their best bet might be to take their first 2 picks in the draft, trade back, and get as many picks as possible, because I don't know if they have the cap space or enough picks to fill all the holes they have in this roster.
It sounds like you guys could fill all the time in the world with talking about the Dolphins roster. I know some people, if you want to make a phone call, we can try to make that happen. Let's go on to the Jets. I worked sideline for 2 of their games this season, and despite the season going south, there's still a ton of belief in Coach Aaron Glenn's vision and what he wants to do. There's a lot of buy-in there. With that 2nd overall pick, Ryan, what can they do to try to maybe build off of that and flip the script this season?
I'm taking a deep breath, Tiffany, because once Dante Moore went back to college, that was a big issue for the Jets. They need a quarterback. They're not going to take one at 2, I don't think, maybe at 16, but instead I went with Arvell Reese, the edge rusher / linebacker out of Ohio State. He is the best or the second best player in this draft class, and he is going to be Micah Parsons-like wherever he lands. So it doesn't matter how many defensive players you have, you can always add an extra Arvell Reese. If they decide to go offense with that second first-round pick, Jordan Tyson, the wide receiver out of Arizona State, would make a ton of sense. Garrett Wilson has been begging for some help. Jordan Tyson would bring that and then some. And then, of course, you just got to figure out the quarterback, which is a pretty big issue for a Jets team that hasn't had a quarterback since Sam Darnold, maybe?
Yeah, and what happened to him? He left New York and won a Super Bowl. So maybe that's what Justin Fields will do next, because I do not think he is going to be the quarterback there in 2026. But that, to me, they are like the Dolphins. The first thing they have to get figured out is who is our quarterback going to be. Poor Jets. It's like Dante Moore waited to see who was going to get the number 2 overall pick and thought, oh, it's the Jets. I'm going to stay in college. So now you got to figure out what to do. Do you make a trade for someone like Tua Tagovailoa? Can you convince a division rival to make a trade with you? Do you go and make a deal for Kyler Murray? Do you go after a free agent? It's not a deep class at quarterback. And so once they get that position settled, the other thing the Jets have to figure out is really their entire defense. It's a good thing they have a defensive coach in Aaron Glenn, because they need people at every level of the football, or every level of that defense. So it is going to be a busy offseason for them, and the quarterback is the first thing they need to get figured out when free agency starts on March 11th.
All right, great insight, great looking into the draft and the offseason needs for all of these teams. Sit tight, guys, because we'll be back with you in just a minute. Let's take a look at the odds. And it's looking pretty good for Buffalo. Could this be the year?
Oh, Tiffany, we say it every season. I want it to be. I want it for Josh Allen. I really do.